Hello everyone, Randy Harrington here. In this picture you see a gentleman named Kerry Arnold. I'm sure everyone knows Kerry Arnold. And the gentleman next to him is Richard Farabee. Richard is from Florida. I recently did a interview with Richard and we certainly talked about his very good friend, maybe even best friend, Kerry Arnold. But before I let you guys hear his interview, I need to give you this interview first, which is a video about John Mionczynski. He was a naturalist that worked for Yosemite National Park and or Yellowstone, I'm sorry, Yellowstone National Park, and he was doing a study on bighorn sheep in the Wind River area of the park. So he has a fascinating story, and it relates to what Richard Farabee said about something moving around his tent and felt like or sounded like something was rubbing its hand across the tent. So I remembered John Mionczynski's story. You are going to have to hear it from his words, and it's pretty fantastic, giving his credentials and then later in the week, I will put out the interview with Richard Farabee so you can compare the two. All right, thank you. Since a couple of these videos are found online, I need to start with the Title 17, that covers everything legally. But the first is going to be an interview actually given by John Mionczynski. The interview is of a Native American woman who had a Bigfoot encounter in the same area that John had his encounter. So let's hear her stories first to kind of set the timeline of what happens to him in the following story, but hers will come first.
I'd say about 11 years old. Me and my younger brothers and cousins and friends, we were out in our chicken coop that wasn't quite finished, so the windows were open. And we were playing in there. It was kind of cold. It was in March. And we're flying a kite. And we only had one kite, so we were all huddled around this one kite. And we let it out as far as it could go. And then as we were reeling it back in, because we started to get cold, one of the kids, he looked this way. He looked down the road and he said, Who's that guy watching us over there? And we all looked and we were like, we didn't know who it was, but whoever it was, he was really big. He was tall, taller than our little fence pole, came up to him about to here. And the fence pole we later found out was about 5 foot something, maybe 8. He looked kind of hairy. He had no neck. His neck was really short like that. And he seemed like he had really long arms. Cause he would stand there and watch us, and every now and then he'd lean over like this. And then he'd stand back up and watch us some more. And we were frantically winding in our kite, and we wouldn't let it go. And then it started to snow a little bit. And as it got more and more snow, his coloring, it became gray from the snow. But he stood there, and then finally one of my little brothers, he said, I'm going to go tell Dad. So he ran out of the door and was heading around the corner, and within that split second, it was gone. It ran into the trees. So it disappeared like just in a blink of an eye.
Did you think it was a Sasquatch or
one of these characters? We've never heard of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. We've heard of the boogeyman and the Urtzi, the monster. And, our parents scared us with those mythical creatures. But we never heard of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And we called it the big black figure.
Could you recall what year that would have been?
I would say that was 1960. I was born in 55, so I was about 11 or 12, so about 67 maybe.
Okay.
And there was about 8 of us, 8 kids that we all seen it. And it never really came around again after that time. till later in the 70s. That's when there were more sightings. And in the sighting that I'm going to tell you about now was my brother Ed. He was up in an area we call Coyote Basin, and he was hunting on his horse. He had a rifle on his back, and he was hunting. And it was getting dusk, and he was gonna head home. Then he decided, well, I'm gonna try one more place to see if I can find something. And so he goes over this ridge, and he said everything happened like in a split second. It was like slow motion, he said. And what happened was him and his horse came over the ridge, and he said he saw the horse's ears go like that, and it just stopped. And then they all looked at each other, and at the very bottom, way down there was this Bigfoot sitting down there, and he was eating something like that. And he was eating some off the ground, and then he looked up at him like that. And he said the look that that Bigfoot gave them was the look of murder. That's how he described it to me. And he said that thing just came up on all fours, like just leaped. He said like within 4 leaps, he was already halfway up, just boom, boom, boom. And he said he could actually see the muscles rippling and the hair and that look in its eyes. And he said it was fast. He said it just bound up at him. And in that instant, that horse did that with his ears. He just turned like that. And my brother almost fell off, and he grabbed that horse's neck. And they took off down to the foothills. And he said he couldn't stop his horse for nothing.
Do you remember hearing other stories from people in that area?
Yeah, there was one where this old rancher guy lived out in the Red Canyon area by Trout Creek. And he said he came home to his trailer one night, came home late from somewhere. And he said he seen it as he pulled in. He seen it. It was in the field, and he had an old car, and he saw it, and it ducked. And it was trying to hide behind this big sagebrush, but the sagebrush couldn't hide it. And so he's put his headlights are on it, and he starts panicking. He got scared of it, and he's trying to back out. And he backed out, and he was trying to go, and he got stuck. And so he's stuck, and his headlights are still aimed at that thing that he sees. And so he's finally gets it in gear, and he takes off. But he said it was really big, and it was really fast. And he did notice it jumping on the sagebrush as it ran off. And then the next day, or a few days later, he found his horses. They were laying in a gully, and I actually saw the horses. And they were, I would say it was a massacre. It was a little ravine, a little gully, and there was 4 dead horses in there. And what had happened was their necks were all ripped out, just about, a horse neck. Yeah. That big was just a rip on all of them. And also their butt, their tail end area, they were all ripped. And they were just laid out and dead. And whatever killed them had to have been fast, because if you imagine horses, they're pretty fast. And if something's being attacked, the other ones are going to go. But it got all of them.
Where you grew up, there were a lot of horses. Did you hear other stories of horses being spooked by this?
My sister, they live by the river, and a lot of times their horses were being bothered by something outside, and they would, have that. They go out and try to scare it off, and sometimes there'd be a bad odor outside. But I remember one time they lived in this little old house, and they had left. And the kids were home with their uncle who was in college, and they were in the house, and they said something climbed on the top of the house, and it was big, whatever it was, really big, and it was walking around and jumping around. And they got really scared of it. And so the college student, he got them all together, and they were crying, and he put them in the middle of the room, and they had their gun. He got a gun, a rifle, and he was aiming at the door and looking for whatever was up, bouncing around and stomping. And he said it was doing that for a while, and the kids were just crying. And Then it went to this kitchen area, which is kind of low. It was about 8 feet. And they said it was really jumping hard over there. Then it went back, and just then Beatrice came home, and that thing took off, jumped off the house and took off. And the Cecil, he didn't realize that it was that they had come home. And when she opens the door, there they are facing a rifle aimed at them because, they were scared.
And who's Beatrice?
My sister. And she was like, "What's going on?" And the kids were hysterical. But another one, I actually remember this one, was my niece, George. She was, we were washing dishes, and at that time we had to heat water, then dump the basin water out onto the porch. And so she went outside to dump her dishwater, and we had this old black truck parked, and we had trash in it, just so we can take it to the dump. And she said when she walked out, there was something big leaning into it, and it was eating, and she said it was making like an ugly slurping noise. And then it looked up at her, and she just screamed and threw her little basin of water and just ran back in. And she said it really smelled bad outside too when she opened the door, and they kind of seen each other. But she wouldn't empty water for a long time in the dark.
Wow. And that's in the early 70s.
Yeah, same time.
All right, now let's get into John's encounter story. And it begins with him having to collect a tent at the headquarters location so that he could go up into the mountains and do his study.
He was there, and I grabbed the tent, and he said, "That one's got a big grease stain on the side of it," because he had spilled some bacon grease on the tent. And he said, "I don't think you want to bring that up in the bear country." And it was the only tent left, and I told him that I was going to have to take it because I'd already made arrangements for my horses to take me up. So I had a camp in the woods, protected from the wind, because we were up around 9,000 feet. I went to bed, crawled in my sleeping bag, and there was a full moon, and then I heard something behind my tent, and I didn't know what it was, but it sounded like breathing, and it got closer, and then I saw a silhouette in the moonlight cast on the side of the tent. The silhouette, you could see the hair moving, and it was low, so I thought, well, this could be the bear coming into that bacon grease. It looked like it was licking it. It was pushing in on that nylon. And I could hear it breathing, because it wasn't breathing normally like a bear would. And it was very slow breathing. And it was kind of a... And that snoring sound, I call it a grumbling sound, was happening both on the inhale and the exhale. It was very deep and resonant, like you hear from an elk. I was in my sleeping bag, and my right shoulder was very close, within 6 inches of that wall of the tent. And it got more and more aggressive. It started pushing in the nylon closer to my shoulder. I was getting concerned. I always slept at that time with a Tupperware container with cayenne pepper in it. So I got that out, and I thought, well, I'm going to scare it away. Hit it with the back of my hand, and I went, ah! And it went behind some dog hair pine, and I could snoring sound got louder, and then it came back. And then the shadow showed up in the same place on the side of the tent. Stuck its nose into the grease, and I hit it again. Second time, made the same loud noise. It ran back behind the tent again, same place. I could still hear it. The third time it came back, there was a shadow from whatever this animal was over the top of the tent, so it was high, because this was a tent I could stand up in. So the shadow in the moonlight indicated it was probably a bear standing on its hind legs, which is not common. And this time, instead of hitting something soft with the back of my fingers, I hit something really rock hard.
Now, I have to say that I have heard John's story before, and he's got a lot of details. This is more of a condensed version, but the hard thing that he had seen on the side of the tent that he thought was the nose of the bear was actually the kneecap that was touching the side of the tent. That's why it was so hard when he hit it. It felt like bone, but it ended up being the kneecap, and that's why the Bigfoot collapsed onto the tent.
And the same time I did that, the whole shadow shifted, and I saw this hand that was twice the size of mine. And I say hand rather than paw because it had an opposed thumb, and it came down on the top of the tent, and it went right down and collapsed the tent right along my legs, right on top of my ankles. So I was thinking, whatever this was, tried to turn around quick and use the tent for support with its hand, and didn't realize it was going to collapse. This animal fell down across my legs and then got up and ran off behind the same trees, and it was making that same grumbling sound. So I crawled out of the tent and rebuilt fire and sat there facing those pine trees where the sound was coming from. I wanted to see what would come out from behind those trees, and I had my gun in my lap. I waited and waited, and I could hear this grumbling, breathing sound, and it didn't come out. After quite a while went by, what happens after you've had high adrenaline, I'm sure you know, is you get tired. So I dozed off and woke up to the sound of something hitting my campfire. And I didn't know what it was, and then I saw a pine cone that seemed to come out of the tree right by my tent. And then another one came, and I realized it wasn't falling out of the tree. This was being lobbed at me from behind those pine trees that the sound was coming from. So over a period of 40 minutes or so, can't remember now exactly how long it was, I had about 20 pine cones thrown at the fire or me. I was sitting right there, so it could have been me. And they were all over the place. It wasn't accurate throwing, but it was definitely pine cones lobbing over in an arc from behind those trees. Nothing showed up that night. In the morning, there were no tracks because I was in pine duff and nothing would leave tracks. So I told my boss about it. I was sitting in his office with the door open, and he got up when I started telling this story, and he closed the door. He asked me if I believed in Sasquatch. I didn't know what to say. I just said, well, I don't really know. He said, after hearing your story, I have to tell you there were about over 20 reports that came into this office from people camping in the mountains that had seen a large hairy primate. That surprised me. I didn't know that because I'd been in the mountains. He said, would you be willing to interview these people that made these reports and take it on as another job, since your bighorn sheep are going to be down on a winter range pretty soon, because the Forest Service frowns on paying people to study animals that don't exist. But he said, I can justify doing this on the basis of big game hunters who are after the ultimate trophy have been showing up asking me where the last sighting was. And if they kill somebody in a monkey suit, I'm involved in the court case. So I took on the job. And I did that. I interviewed 25 people that fall that had filed reports with the Forest Service that claimed to have had sightings. Some of them were very plausible. One guy was being harassed by a large hairy primate walking by his house, making a little sound every time it came by, and scaring his wife and little baby. They were Native American, so they had heard stories of Nowazi, which is a Shoshone word for Bigfoot. They decided to turn the lights out in the cabin, so in the moonlight they could see what was outside the window. And that time they heard it outside there. It went by the same window every time. And this time they heard the noise, and they were sitting there watching. Mother had her baby in her lap. And what they heard was it rubbing up against the side of the cabin, a little one-room cabin. And they were looking, waiting to see it walk by, but instead they saw this head come down, upside down, looking inside the house. And it was a huge, hairy head. It was twice the size of a human head. And she started screaming, and then the baby started howling and screaming, and she said, I'm not staying here anymore. So he took it on himself to shoot it when next time it came by. So he shot it outside his front door with a deer rifle right in the chest, he said, because it was like 30 feet away in the garden that was right outside their front door. And it was stealing vegetables. And it went over, and then it got up and ran away. So he said he was pretty sure he had shot it in the chest, and yet it survived and ran off. But I went there, and he showed me where it fell over, how tall it was. When he was looking at it, when he cracked open his cabin door and saw it 30 feet away, it was standing under a yard light and next to a tool shed. The yard light was attached to the tool shed. So he said, I can tell you where the head was. It was here. And it was 7.5 feet tall. I cruised around there. I saw where the foot tracks were, took photographs of those, measured them, and they were bigger than human feet would be. And there were hair samples on the fence that was knocked over by this thing falling down. So I collected all of the hair off of that fence, plank. It was a plank fence. Called up the head of the Game and Fish Lab because I knew him from working for Game and Fish Department. He looked at them under the microscope, and he said they were not a species native to Wyoming, and that's the only thing he could tell me officially. And then unofficially, he came outside the lab room, and he said, unofficially, I've studied hair a lot, so I kind of know the different morphological types, and I can tell you that this looks like primate hair. So you need to go to the anthropology department and have them have a forensic person look at it. This is an exact quote. He said, this is my first stumper. It is primate hair, but it doesn't match any of my type specimens. Gigantopithecus blackie was a giant ape in northern India. This ape would have been about 1,000 pounds. 300,000 years ago was living in a Douglas fir habitat type that was contiguous with Northern California and British Columbia, where we currently have sightings of Bigfoot. The fossil evidence we had was in caves because you don't get any fossils from acid soils where you have conifer forests, which are acid soils. That eats up the bones and you don't get fossils. But caves are not acidic, usually, especially in a limestone forest habitat where you've got acidic soil, but inside the cave it's limestone, so it's alkaline soil, and that preserves bones. I was employed by the U.S. Forest Service and the Wyoming Game and Fish Department on a cooperative study. The project was set up so that I would live in the wild. I was approached by something that cast a shadow. The moon was just coming up, was almost a full moon. I clearly saw a hand with 4 fingers and an opposed thumb, like a human hand, and it was large. It was twice the size of my hand. It was getting aggressive with its movements on the side of the tent. I hit it with the back of my hand. Whatever it was, it backed off, ran back behind some trees, so I was totally perplexed. I have to say that the thought of Sasquatch never occurred to me at that moment. I eventually interviewed about 25 people. The most interesting one was a young man in a little cabin up against the mountain. He had reported seeing one of these behaving aggressively in front of his cabin, and he shot it. And he thought he'd killed it, but it got up immediately and ran off. The analysis came back a few days later, and Walter Birkby said, and this is a quote, "This is my first stumper. These hairs are primate," and he was certain about that. The result was controversial because the hairy primate is not of an animal native to Wyoming. That kind of suggested the idea of Bigfoot. The head of the research division actually chewed us out, pointing his finger at us and saying, If your names are ever associated with this word Bigfoot again, I will personally see to it that you're fired.
So there you have it, folks. This has several components to it, whereas his bosses told him to keep his mouth shut. The creature that was at his tent, he talked about it making noise on its exhale and inhale. Remember, we talked about that on the Mike Bueller video and the howler monkey type sounds where they make noise on the exhale and the inhale. So it's funny that he mentioned that specifically. So that is some interesting components. And the messing with the tent and the hand above the tent that he saw in the moonlight is going to be the same type of situation in my next video that involves Richard Farabee from Florida. Thank you so much.